This week's episode of Discovering Trek is brought to you exclusively by Fansets. Later on in this episode, we'll have a special discount offer just for Discovering Trek listeners. Discover a whole new universe of pin collectibles with Fansets. Online at fansets.com.
A reunion, a revelation, and an evolution. Episode 6 of Star Trek Discovery ushered in a confident and fearless Saru as he returned to his beloved home planet of Kaminar to investigate the latest in the Red Burst mystery, while Dr. Culber is trying to figure out how to be alive again. I guess it's all part of the great balance. Welcome aboard, everyone. My name is Dan Davidson, and we are Discovering Trek. Welcome one and all to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Discovery Companion, presented by Fansets. Ever since Bowie Kim and Erica Lippold gave us the remarkable short trek The Brightest Star late last year, I've been wondering if and when we would revisit Saru's homeworld, and I'm glad we didn't have to wait long. These two brilliant writers did it again with this week's episode, and Saru's return was not like anything he or we could have expected. Add to that some awkward moments in sickbay with Dr. Culber trying to figure out who he is now, plus the return to the central storyline of the Red Burst and the Red Angel. We were gifted with yet another amazing Star Trek story. As always, this is the premier podcast for the most in-depth discussion and analysis about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery entitled The Sound of Thunder. With so much to get into, I think it's time to bring in my trusted partner to break it all down. And, you know, sometimes I'm not sure if he's a big, scary, icky monster coming out of the black goo, or if he's my Red Angel coming to save the day. But I do know this. He's my very special friend, my brother in Trek, and my amazing number one. He is Bill Smith. Bill, welcome aboard, buddy. And before I get started, I cannot thank you or our dear friend Barry DeFord for filling in for me last week as I dealt with the passing of my father-in-law. Thank you, my dear friend, and thank you to all the listeners who voiced their condolences over the past week. Sue and I greatly appreciate it.
Buddy, it's good to have you back. I'll tell you this, you make hosting Discovering Trek look really easy. It is not, as Barry and I found out last week. So it's good to have you back, and it's good to be back in the chair where I belong. And might I add, hashtag icky black goo.
Yes, I like that hashtag. Let's use it. Let's do it. It's good to have you back. It's good for me to be back, actually. And as we have seen week after week, the latest episode of Discovery just continues to hit it out of the park. I'm waiting for one that's going to be kind of a downer because it can't keep at this level, can it? Well, it has so far. So we got a lot to talk about today. And I got to say, we got a really special guest sitting in with us to talk about The Sound of Thunder. Why don't you tell us who we got here sitting? I'm looking at his smile right now, and he looks marvelous, I got to say.
Oh, he's our guest? No. Dan, he's one of the co-producers of the acclaimed fan film series Star Trek Continues, and also an executive producer of Fleet, and also Yorktown, A Time to Heal. He's also one of the producers of this fine podcast, I might add. He's our dear friend and brother, Kasey Shafsky, and he joins us for his very first appearance on Discovering Trek. Kasey, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. Could not wait all week to be here with you, and just like let's get into it, man.
It's good to see you. You know, we only get to see you like once a year, so it's good to see you digitally at least until the next time, hopefully, where we can reconvene in the desert at STLV. We always have a great time, man.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. But I mean, I do try and send you pictures every week, Dan, so.
Yeah, I don't open them. Anyway, gentlemen, before the Baul surround us with weapons hot, Bill, perhaps you should tell our listeners how they can get in touch with us to give their thoughts about The Sound of Thunder.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Ganglionic dart weapons are set to full power, buddy. On Twitter, we can be found at Discovering Trek. And on Ye Olde Book of Faces, you can catch up to us at facebook.com/Discovering Trek. In either place, you can become part of the discussion or even leave us questions or comments, the whole nine. We'll pretty much listen to it all. Plus, you can now send us a voicemail by going to our website at trekgeeks.com and clicking on the giant blue button on the right-hand side. Please do remember, though, that any comments you might leave us could be used in a future episode of Discovering Trek. Dan.
Thanks, Bill. Ganglia dart weapon. So funny.
Black alert. Black alert.
From here on in, folks, this episode of Discovering Trek contains spoilers. So if you haven't watched Season 2, Episode 6 of Star Trek Discovery, stop listening right now. Head on over to CBS All Access or wherever you watch Discovery. Watch the latest episode and then head back on over to Discovering Trek. Failure to do that puts you at risk to find out plot developments and character details for The Sound of Thunder.
Trainees, to the briefing room.
So, gentlemen, as we gather in the briefing room to start our discussion on this week's episode, let's first get your high-level thoughts, as we like to do every week. Was it a thumbs up? Was it a thumbs down? And why? And Mr. Kasey, we will start with you.
All right. Thank you, sir. A definite thumbs up for me once again. I think Discovery's really hitting its stride in the writing and performances, and this was like the third episode in a row for me that was really strong. And that came through because I was hoping that I'd get a Saru-centric or an Ash Fandango-centric episode with you guys. And so we got through, and I was like, okay, we're going to be able to dive into Doug Jones just working that character as much as possible. And I found, once again, that the larger use of all the characters, especially on the bridge, is making it a deeper show for me and a narrative than when season 1. I loved it.
Nice. Okay, Bill, how about you, buddy?
You know, I have to say, I think this is a fantastic episode. And after the frenzied pace of the last several installments, I think this one is paced very well, and it grows Saru's character in a way that not only gives us answers, but makes us ask even more questions. This one is an absolute thumbs up for me, and it's a great extension of what they started in The Brightest Star over the summer.
For me, this, I talked about how great the episode was at the beginning. It wasn't the strongest episode of the season for me, but that's not taking away anything from the episode because the season has just been so amazing. It is a big thumbs up for me. The whole idea of tying in the short trek from earlier this season with this episode was brilliant. And as I mentioned before, Bowie and Erica have done an absolutely amazing job giving us that historical information about the Kelpiens and the Baul. And it was a great way for this episode to get back on track with the Red Angel, which really hasn't been the focus for a couple of weeks. I also thought that the Culber aspect of the story was, well, I guess the best way to put it is I felt a little bit differently than I think the majority of people think, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. But definitely thumbs up. So, again, 3 thumbs up, which seems to be what we do every week nowadays on Discovering Trek.
That's something I'm perfectly okay with because I think it just tells us more about the quality of the writing this season, to be honest.
Before we get into the discussion points, that's a good thing to talk about, Bill. We've talked on Trek Geeks and when we're talking with fans and such that every series seems to take a little bit of time to really get going. TNG took a couple of seasons. Deep Space Nine took a season. Voyager took 7 seasons. I'm just kidding. And it really is amazing to me how fast Discovery has gotten its space legs and has become one of the strongest storytelling Star Treks that we have out there. What do you guys think about that? Kasey?
I agree. I think how other series have started up, it seemed to me they were struggling to find what they were, who they were, and all that. And boy, with just 1 season under their belt, Discovery comes out, and the depth and the richness of everything that they're telling us and showing us. So far, I've been really, really happy as a fan of what they're giving us, and that it's happening so fast in their run. I was kind of surprised on how fast it came through, where I'm like, boy, solid episode after solid episode after solid episode. And I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled for them because I think a lot of us who are watching it are giving them feedback of how wonderful we think the series is in this season so far, and that's got to be great for them and building points for the future.
Absolutely. Bill, your thoughts?
I think you're right, and I think it's it speaks to the nature of how writing for television has changed. With previous Star Treks, I mean, they were episodic. I mean, they developed amnesia from week to week, and it was a chance to start over at ground zero and begin again with a whole new story. Whereas, and we've talked about this on both Discovering Trek and Trek Geeks, Star Trek Discovery is more like a novel for television that unfolds in X number of chapters. Last season, 15 chapters, and this season will be 14 chapters. And it tells one mostly cohesive story over that time. And I think that using that to guide the season has really elevated the episode quality and the writing quality for Star Trek. And I think it's made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of chapters, let's get right into chapter 6 for this week's episode of Discovery, The Sound of Thunder. First thing I want to bring up, I think it's the central part of this episode, is the change that we see in Saru, both physically and in his overall confidence. The confidence is there. The arrogance, dare I say, is there, and we can discuss those points a little bit as we go along. We saw him blatantly disobey Pike's direct orders in this episode, which was a shock for me. At the same time, we saw that confidence in that funny moment on the bridge where he forgot, quote unquote, to get out of the captain's chair, and Pike's just kind of looking at him like I look at Bill most of the time. It was really great to see this change in him, and it made me think just how dependent the Kelpiens are on those threat ganglia. Kasey, let's start with you. What did you think about what we saw with Saru this week?
I thought what we saw is a character who's really learning and struggling a bit with, now that his fear is repressed. It's not gone, but as the doctor says, it's very repressed. So Saru is really learning how to be himself now in a completely different way. And I look at it and go, oh, okay, this is a person in a certain way going through an adolescence of, well, I'm not frightened about everything anymore. And like you said, I have this confidence or strength and doesn't know how to meter that and be appropriate or be respectful in certain ways, just learning, but by no means in any self-centered or bad way towards others. It's just like, oh, okay, this person's learning. And in fact, I loved how Pike reacted and didn't react to Saru in this, because I saw in the Pike character is like, boy, he is giving Saru a lot of leeway here, and
yep,
right, and realizing it's like, okay, this is all new for Saru, so gonna give him some rope, and then when it's like time to go, okay, enough, some simple, straight, tough love, and there you go.
I loved what I was thinking as I was watching the episode is we have two characters on the show that have essentially been reborn. We've got Saru with this entirely new way of life without his threat ganglia, and we have Culber, who is literally learning how to be alive again. I did like how there was that relation, especially in the scene with sickbay, which we will get into in a little bit later. But Bill, what do you think about what we saw with Saru? I got to say, Kasey, and Bill, I'll ask you about this as well. You're absolutely right. The way that the Pike character has developed, he realizes what Saru's going through, and he gives him that wide berth until it's time to not give him that wide berth. And I thought that was great. But Bill, what do you think about Saru this week, buddy?
I agree entirely. In fact, Kasey brought up a great point. This really is kind of an emotional adolescence for Saru. As kids, we're taught what to fear because we don't necessarily enter the world with fear that we know. We learn by slamming our hands in cabinet doors and by doing things that generate pain or frustration or fear. And Saru doesn't know how to manifest that at this time. So I could see that coming across as a little bit of cockiness. I could see that coming across as maybe not arrogance, but perhaps acting supremely overconfident in a time to overcompensate. But I think, that fear is repressed, and it makes me wonder when that other shoe is going to drop. Because really all he's lost is his early warning system to that fear. He hasn't lost the emotion altogether.
It will be interesting to see what happens. I liked how, as usual, and it seems that we say this week after week, Doug Jones's portrayal of the changes that Saru is going through is again just up on a level that it's just spectacular. And I have a feeling we'll be getting into that a little bit later during maybe commendations. We'll see. But Bill, I know that there was one thing as we were putting together the outline for this week's episode. We were talking about one thing, and I know that there was a specific point that you wanted to bring up. Why don't you go ahead and bring into that discussion, and then we'll talk about it with Kasey a little bit.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to use a little bit of the host chair from last week to maybe pose a question to both of you. So there has been some conversation online as to whether or not General Order 1 has just been thrown out the window. Whether the Prime Directive is irrelevant because Starfleet really shouldn't have interfered here. And Are they throwing away the Prime Directive, and or is it any different than what happened specifically in the original series with Kirk and say, I don't know, the Feeders of Vol or any other race or alien species that they came into contact with? Kasey, let's start with you.
I have a lot of mixed thinking about how Starfleet has this one rule. And I get it for a dramatic effect on a show and for narratives and storytelling. But boy, it seems a lot of captains are just like, yeah, it's kind of there. Yeah, they tell us about it. I'm just going to keep, we're not leaping over this line, but I'll just walk over it and then maybe step back a little bit later on. So on this, I go, I don't think that they broke the order, but it's just to me something that isn't rigid and flat and is a black or white issue, which very much helps for storytelling so that there can be this gray area and that people have an internal and external conflict about this of, boy, we could really mess this up for this whole other civilization, or we could help it, and then what do we do there? And is there a right choice and or a wrong choice?
Dan, what about you? Are they traipsing a fine line here, or is this really no different than every other Prime Directive quandary we've seen?
Name me one captain in every Star Trek series that we've seen over the last 50 years who didn't violate the Prime Directive. You can't. They all have. The only one who I would say maybe didn't was Archer, but that's because it didn't exist yet. But then when they started talking about it in the episode, I believe, what was it, Dr. Doctor?
Dear Doctor?
Dear Doctor, yep. Then possibly. So they said it themselves in this episode. We can bend it as long as we don't break it. I mean,
right.
I'll use that as a sports analogy. How many times do the Patriots let the team get into the red zone, but they bend but don't break? It just happens. I had to throw that in, Kasey. I'm sorry. We just won our 6th championship. Anyway, so I can see where some people may be upset, but when I look at this particular episode, what did Starfleet actually do that would have broken the Prime Directive? It's hard for me to really come up with specific ways that they didn't. Saru's a Kelpien. He's the one that went down there. He decided to go on his own. The only thing that Starfleet did that I saw was any question was they were getting ready to go into battle with them. They had nothing to do with what happened. They're not. Starfleet's not the Red Angel. They didn't have the Red Angel show up and do what they did in order for all the Kelpiens to go through the process where I'm backtracking a little bit, but if it wasn't for the Red Angel showing up, it's hard to describe, I guess, as you can tell, because I'm kind of at a loss for words.
I think that a lot of people, or those people who have this complaint, say that it wasn't up to Starfleet to reveal to the Kelpiens that there was life outside Kaminar other than the Baul, that they've effectively changed the evolution of the species. I can understand that on some level, but I think that there was a humanitarian reason to interfere, especially since the Great Balance was essentially a lie.
But let me ask you this. So we'll stay on this topic, because it's really a great discussion, is Starfleet didn't do that. Yes, Saru is a Kelpian, but he took it upon himself to go down to the planet with Burnham to talk about what was going on. I don't think that was it a Starfleet decision, or was it a Kelpian decision who just happens to be the only one that was in Starfleet? Oh, God, I think we could talk about this for hours.
I think ultimately it comes down to a Starfleet decision, because Pike is the one who sends him down, and sends Burnham, who obviously, they've never seen an outsider before. They've never seen the Baul. So, I mean, obviously Burnham was very alien to them. I'm not saying I agree with these people. I don't think that they violated the Prime Directive in any way. I think they bent it, to achieve the means. But like you said, Dan, it's like every other captain in every other series. I mean, Benjamin Sisko poisons a planet.
Yeah.
And this is certainly nowhere near that.
Kasey, let me ask you this. Actually, a question for both of you guys before I ask my question to Kasey. Are the Baul part of Kaminar? Were they of that world, or was it discussed in the episode that they were not from that world? I'm taking it as they are. So if they are, they have warp capability. Just because the Kelpiens didn't get warp capability doesn't mean that the Prime Directive can only be taken in for one part of the planet and not for the other. That makes no sense to me. So if they're a warp-capable species, then there's no violation of the Prime Directive just because they decide to talk to the other people on the planet. That could open up a whole new can of worms, because I think we've seen that in other episodes, particularly TNG, where one half of the planet had technology and one didn't. But I think, like I said, they bent it, they didn't break it, and I like that they actually said that during the episode. Kasey, what about you?
I agree on that, because I'm thinking if they're warp capable, it means they have been out in a space. And I think they are original inhabitants of that planet. And I mean, I kept finding this, like, when their base, is hidden under the lake. And I'm going, okay, you're technology superior in many ways, but have they, the Baul, contacted other species out in space, and that's something we just don't know? Because it would be, if you're warp capable, why wouldn't you be exploring in some way or another to see what's going on? And I don't think there was any breaking of the general order.
General Order 1, Prime Directive, it all changes. It's okay. It's part of the Great Balance, I suppose. Speaking of the Great Balance, what a great segue. Let's stay with Kaminar, since we've been talking about it a little bit, and the Baul especially. I think we all saw the preview the week before of what was going to happen this week, and we saw that creature, the Baul, and then we saw him in the actual episode. Wow. Nightmare-looking alien. I thought it was great, and I know a lot of people online have been talking about it's familiar looking, and is it possibly the species that we saw in TNG with Armis when killed Tasha Yar? And I know we got discussion about that. Bill, what do you think in regards to that? Personally, I don't think it is, but I love the look of them.
Oh, I love the look of them too. Initially, I didn't think of Armis when I saw the Baul. I thought of Samara from The Ring. Because I was that creeped out.
The hair.
The hair, the little glowy eye thing. In an interview with TrekMovie.com, an exclusive interview with them, they asked Bowie and Erica if there was any similarity between Baul and Armis. And their reply was the resemblance to Armis is merely coincidental. So no Metamucil and black printer's ink, I'm guessing, for the Baul. And Jonathan Frakes can rest easy. But man, what a look. Certainly a race, a species to be fearful of. And I think that was conveyed really well.
Fearful of, yeah, that's an understatement. You think that they've had warp capability for 20 years, I think they said in the episode, but look at the size of those ships when they surrounded Discovery.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, and I say this I'm kind of a nut to say this, but I'm hoping we get to see them again. And not in a good way. I would love to see what they have in store. Kasey, what did you think about the Baul? And you remind me of one from time to time.
Well, thank you, my dark soul. I loved them. I think they could be an amazing antagonist species in the future. And like the actor who portrayed the main Baul, was in I believe Mama, horror movie Mama, which is really good, and Rec, R-E-C. And so I've seen this guy's work before, and it's creepy as hell. It just, there is a body vibe and movement in this person where you go, whoa, that just looks unnatural to us. Mm-hmm. And like I said, 20 years warp capable. I would love to think that, hey, there's some ships maybe out there that are going to get this information of what the Federation did and decide, we're not kosher with that. We're coming to get you. And like I said, the size of their ships and the nimbleness of those ships. It wasn't like some lumbering starship. There was there and back out again immediately. I go, boy, these could be some great villains in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going from the scary, let's go to the wonderful. Let's talk about Siranna. I was very excited to see her again. Unfortunately, I don't have the name of the actress. I know I should have.
Hannah Spear.
Her name is Hannah. Yeah, Hannah it was so great to see her in the short trek. It was great to see her again. She, like Doug Jones, is able to just show the emotion that is hidden under all of that makeup. I don't know how they do it, but I got to give her a big thumbs up to what she did. It was great to see her, and I love the fact that they left it wide open for us to see her again. Bill, what did you think about her?
I agree with you all around. I thought she was fantastic in The Brightest Star this summer, and I thought she was even better here. I liked that she became a priest for her village to try to become closer to that light that took Saru. I thought that was a great way for her character to grow in that regard. And I love that she said to me, I hope that you would come back, but I never wanted you to come back because that meant you were free. At that point, I got tears in my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, this is beautiful. Oh my God, this is so awesome. And I just thought she was the perfect match for Saru. I thought that Doug Jones and Hannah Spear played very well opposite each other. And yeah, I absolutely hope to see Siranna again because I'd like to see what happens to her and the Kelpiens after this.
Kasey, one of the things that I liked about her character in this episode is she's excited that Saru is alive, obviously, and is back. But at the same time, that brother-sister dynamic certainly comes out, and she just takes him to task for what he did. And I thought that was a great aspect. You get this great reunion of brother and sister, but look what you did. I thought that was a great part of the episode. What'd you think?
Oh, absolutely. It reminds me of a family dynamic where I go, if you're all walking out on a trail in the forest and your brother barrels ahead on the trail and you can't see him and you get a little bit scared and he comes running back and everything's fine. And so first off, you're like thrilled, like, I love you. This is great. And then you go, and don't you ever do that again. Because you had me freaked out and I'm pissed off and oh man, I'm just gonna and I was like, that right there, I go, anyone who's had a sibling goes, I know that dynamic. Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
And she's strong and amazing. And it's like, boy, if they are two examples of their species of, what they were to what they are, and then what they can be. The storytelling's infinite there.
It is. The storytelling, one of the best parts about Discovery is the storytelling. So it was good to see her. Let's go back up in orbit for a minute or two and talk about what is, as far as I'm concerned, Pike's Starship Discovery right now. This guy, Anson Mount, has just been, week after week, has been just blowing it out of the box. He's been fantastic. We talked about it a little bit more, but let's talk about it here. The way he deals with Saru and the way he deals with the Ba'ul, he is badass. And I can't say enough how happy I am that they cast Anson for this role. This is the Pike that everybody's been wishing for over 50 years since we saw him in the cage. And I am thrilled of the storytelling that has gone on specifically with Pike. Let's start with Bill this time. What do you think, man? Because I have a feeling that you are Pike all the way.
I am Team Pike. Anson Mount has now portrayed this character for more screen time than anybody else in the history of Star Trek. To me, this is his role. Jeffrey Hunter may have originated it. Bruce Greenwood may have played it really well in the Kelvin movies. But I tell you what, Anson Mount has made this Christopher Pike his own, and he ranks right up there with the greatest of Starship captains on purpose. The way this character is written and the way he's portrayed is, I want him up there next to Kirk and Picard and Sisko and Janeway and Archer. He belongs there because that's how solid this Starship captain is. He's what you want in a Starship captain, and it couldn't be a better choice casting-wise.
I'm glad you said that because that was going to be my question. Do you think that when you have these collages of all the great Starfleet captains and they always focus in on just the shows, should he be in that collage now? And I definitely think the answer is yes. What about you, Kasey?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're seeing a character who's like a 3D fully evolved character. This isn't a flat-sided anything. The acting, and I go back to this also, the writing for this character to be able to be portrayed in this way is amazing. Yeah, he is a badass, but with thought and contemplative actions and just someone, and I go, oh, this character, but someone, and I go, yeah, I want to follow that guy. Okay, he knows what's going on. And when a character has that, and there's certain things like with Michael, I go, yeah, I want to follow her. There's just this gravitas and almost I'm glad he's here instead of the previous dude.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know one way that we could end the argument if people were to come back and say, "Oh, no, you can only have the captains on there for ones that have been captains of a show." Captain Pike show. Bill, you said it.
I still want a Captain Pike show.
That would be amazing.
After this, I want to see him go back to the Enterprise, and we get that 5-year mission. I would love it.
It would be fantastic. Well, let's go. Let's talk about one more thing in regards to this week's episode. We haven't talked about it yet. It was very small screen time this week, but I think it had a very strong reaction, and that's Dr. Culber. The return of Dr. Culber. He's in sickbay, and I'm going to give you my points first, and I think I'm going to be in the not popular category with what I'm going to say. I had a problem with it. It wasn't what I hoped for, and it wasn't what I was expecting. I was hoping for a much more positive return with Culber. We saw it a little bit when he came back last week. This week, I was kind of crushed. I know he's got to figure out who he is. It bothered me. He's definitely in turmoil. And to be honest, when I was watching the scenes with him and how he was wincing when people were getting close, and especially when Stamets touched where his scar should be, all I was thinking about was the movie Pet Sematary and how when they come back, things aren't right. And I'm worried that something like that could be on the horizon for Dr. Culber. And I hope I'm wrong, because I talked about last week how elated I was in the humanity piece that they're going to have that second chance. And I hope they're able to have that second chance. But right now, he looks like someone who doesn't know what to do, doesn't know who he is. And the thing that scared me the most is, for the most part, he had no emotion in his body language, in his eyes, in the way that he talked. And it scared me a little bit. Kasey, what did you think about those scenes? Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. What I'm seeing is a character that has so much PTSD and is struggling. And what I'm looking forward to is seeing the resolution like you're talking about, but that it's not going to be a fast resolution. You know, when he was in that network and on his own for everything, it's like, what does that do to a person? And then when you come back and you have support around you, but you aren't the same, and then how do you work with that of letting people know, letting yourself know, I'm not the same. This may take a while, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to get through it. I don't like seeing the character suffering, but I like in this that there's time being taken, so it's not, 1 week later and everything's fine. And I think that'll make it much more emotionally satisfying for all of us when whatever conclusion comes, because it's like, none of us want to see anyone suffer. And seeing that we can relate to certain things and then go, oh boy, I hope he's getting better. I hope he's getting better. And we'll find out how that happens. And I think that will lead to a satisfying conclusion.
I do like what you brought up in the fact that it's not going to be next week he's fine, like Worf's broken spine, and next week he was all set. So I do like that aspect. Bill, I know that you've got some strong feelings about what happened in those in the scenes with sick bay this week. So let's hear what you got, man.
Is that kind of like 7 bay and 8 bay?
Yeah, you can just tell us what you think.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm not going to get too deep into some of these points because it might be a spoiler alert for my Starfleet commendations earlier. But I will say, Dan, like you, I did pick up a bit of the Pet Sematary vibe. But unlike you, I think it's really effective. Going back to what Kasey said, I absolutely think that the PTSD plays into it. And I think that it's part of a longer arc. I think that right now it's okay that he has those reactions, because I think that he has to relearn who Hugh Culber is again, and he has to relearn why he loves Paul Stamets. And I think that the love that Stamets has for him is ultimately what's going to get him through this. I think that this is part of the love story, and I don't think that that's going to fall by the wayside. So I do have a lot to say about this scene later on, but hopefully that whets your appetite until then.
Nice. I will say that it was crushing for me to see the love that was pouring out of Stamets in that scene and getting nothing back. I felt horrible for him, and another amazing acting job by everybody involved in that scene. Well, gentlemen, we have reached that moment of Discovering Trek where we take a moment to pause and reflect on those that we've lost in this episode of Star Trek Discovery. It's the somber part of the show, but we feel it's the least we can do for those who have paid the ultimate price. We like to call it the Red Shirt Roll Call.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim.
So, Bill, with all the death we saw in season 1, the section's getting a little boring here in season 2, actually. I mean, I don't like death just as much as the next guy, but let's see, a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have anybody in the Red Shirt Roll Call. Last week, we actually had a -1. I don't even know how that happens, but it did. So what's up with this week, buddy?
Well, Dan, this week, we say goodbye to a whole lot of ganglias. Just about every Kelpien alive went through the Vihari and learned that there's more to life. I'm here to tell you, man, that's a lot of soup in the mirror universe. Okay? A lot of soup. A lot of soup. So, where normally we provide a solemn remembrance of those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the Red Shirt Roll Call, today we celebrate a new future for Saru's Kelpien brothers and sisters, my friend.
Congratulations, Kaminarians, Kelpiens. Never really understood that. But anyway, we're going to raise a glass of synthahol and toast those departed ganglionic apparati from our beloved Saru and Kelpiens everywhere in this week's Red Shirt Roll Call.
This week's episode is brought to you by Fansets, the exclusive sponsor for Discovering Trek. And Dan, we're thrilled to have them back for another season. Available now is the amazing Disco Enterprise pin released earlier this month. It is bold and it's beautiful, and it's just the latest Star Trek pin available from Fansets. Now, you have to check out all of their amazing line of pins at fansets.com. Do yourself a favor. Head on over to their site, put a bunch of pins or maybe some pin accessories or maybe some more pins. The bottom line here is put stuff in your cart. And then at checkout, be sure to enter this week's exclusive checkout code, Kaminar. That's Kaminar in all capital letters. Do that and you're going to get 15% off your entire order at fansets.com. Now, this code is going to be available until Sunday, March 3rd, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Now, Bill, you actually have that beautiful Disco Enterprise pin. I do not have it yet. I am jealous. I am going to order it. And in addition to that pin for the month of February, okay, thank you. He just showed me the pin, kind of. So we are very happy to announce the latest in the Trek Tech series of pins is now available. It's the TOS tricorder, and you can get that both at trekgeeks.com/pins or at fansets.com. But that is not all, gentlemen. Fansets is happy to announce their Star Trek releases for the month of March, and they're dropping right here for the first time on what those are going to be. We're going to see Mirror Universe Landry dropping on March 1st, which is awesome. Team Landry all the way, baby. And then in the middle of the month, we're going to see Voyager's Tom Paris dropping on March 15th. So that's pretty cool also. Plus, the recently announced Uniform Series sets of pins will be debuting soon. You heard that right. The Uniform Series will have actual fabric from the set of Discovery included inside the pin. The guys and girls at Fansets are just geniuses. So save up your Latinum, save up your credits, or save up your Quatlus because Fansets has some awesome stuff on the horizon. Fansets. We are Star Trek, and as always, we thank our friends at Fansets for being our exclusive sponsor for the entire season of Discovering Trek.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
The Star Trek has always been a reflection of our times, and in this segment, we're going to take a look at what this episode helps us discover about humanity, or perhaps even what it tells us about ourselves. Bill, let's start with you this week, my friend. What do you have in terms of your sensor analysis?
Well, this weekend on StarTrek.com, I have a piece that's being published on what Saru has taught me about my anxiety. And after this episode, I think I actually now have to write a follow-up piece. Every Kelpien in existence knows now a life without their early warning system. And while that may in theory give them a life without fear, it might also make them more fearful in the long run. Before they had a certain spider sense that something was wrong. It makes me ask if this might have the opposite effect on some of them. I think there's still going to be things to learn from Saru and the Kelpiens about going boldly, something that I and others with anxiety sometimes have true difficulty doing. But I think that that's an experience we're still going to go on together with them.
Kasey?
I took away from this episode a lot about courage and strength. And that we all have an inner strength to do things or face things that frighten us. And sometimes we're the catalyst for the change. Sometimes someone else is our champion. But that taking risks and taking challenges to things that just to our core can frighten us or scare us is is an amazing thing to do, because that's the courage to face what scares you and do certain things. And whether it's, heights or small places or whatever, that when you have the courage to do something, you change who you are. And they can be incremental steps, or they can be a drastic evolutionary step. And boy, in this episode, I just kept thinking about how we are all changing each day. And some people are scared to face that. Some people embrace it. Some people accept it reluctantly. But that we are all, I think we're all stronger inside than we allow ourselves credit for. And seeing the characters in this episode on how they're changing made me reflect on that for myself and for other people.
I got to admit that this week it was a little hard for me to really focus in on something for this piece. But, the best I could do is that, sometimes life takes us on adventures that we look forward to or that we're not prepared for. Saru was both looking forward to and wasn't prepared for his adventure when he left Kaminar to join Starfleet. Leaving home, whether voluntary or involuntary, is never easy, and I give credit to Saru for making the most of it over the last 18 years. But as we've seen over the last couple of episodes now, that yearning for home is very strong in him. And it actually made me think about Odo and his wanting to return home to the Great Link on Deep Space Nine. Great Link. Great balance. Anyway, Saru got to see firsthand the changes and the consequences of his leaving and what they had on his village, and more importantly, to his sister. But even with the realization of what was happening and what had happened for the years that he was gone, he was truly happy to be home. Home. Family. It's important. It holds so many memories. And if I've appreciated anything over what has happened with me, my wife, and my family over the course of the last week, it's that home is always that. Home. And it's a place we will always have that strong connection to.
Commendations, palm leaf of Axanar Peace Mission, Grand Kite Order of Tactics, Class of Excellence, Prenteris Ribbon of Commendation.
Okay, Kasey and Bill, it's time for some awards. We've talked a little bit about what we might see here. Let's see what you picked this week to receive your Starfleet commendations. Kasey, let's start with you.
Okay, well, Hannah Spear, I can't say enough about her acting, and like we've talked about earlier, but for she and Doug to be able to emote and act so effectively through all the prosthetics, contact lenses where you're not even seeing their eyes. So the vocal range that she had, I was thrilled with. Also loved the dialogue, the written dialogue. So no on the nose speaking from Pike to Saru. I found that different and refreshing. And then lastly, the Kelpiens, man, they keep their beaches pristine.
That's okay. That's good. No litter on Kaminar.
Heck no.
Well, excellent choices. I'm going to say for my accommodations this week, the first one has got to go to Bowie Kim and Erica Lippold. These two amazing people continue to define what the Star Trek universe future holds for us as fans. Another brilliantly written story, and as well as being in charge of the new Section 31 series that was announced recently, I can say for a fact that the future of Trek has never looked better, and these two amazing women are the reason why. My second one's going to go to Anson Mount. We've talked about it already. We've known since episode 1 how great Anson is as Captain Pike. We've seen how he handles different situations, but the scenes he had on the bridge this week, and in particular when he was communicating with the Ba'ul, were just simply awesome. I would not want to get on his bad side ever. Once again, CBS, Anson Mount needs to have a Captain Pike series. I'm just going to throw that out there for you. Just a little bait, reel it in, sign them, do it. 7 seasons. Let's get it done. 5 seasons. And we know it's going to end bad, but that's okay. Anyway, also Doug Jones, got to throw out kudos again. I was looking back, I think in the 6 episodes so far this season, Doug has received a commendation from me, I think 4 times. And each one is so well deserved. His ability to show character emotion when hidden under all that latex is nothing short of genius. And that moment when Siranna beamed off Discovery and he exhaled was just a moment of pure, unfiltered emotion from the actor. I thought it was beautiful. Polish up the Emmy Award, people, and etch Doug Jones's name on it right now. Bill?
Well, I teased this just a little bit ago, but I have to give my first commendation to Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp. That scene with the two of them in sickbay is literally fantastic. You can feel the unconditional love from Stamets, and you can feel the uncertainty and the difference in Culber and the stress and the trauma. And there's just so much here that happens in the reactions alone, completely separate from the dialogue. And it is performed fantastically and beautifully. Yeah, it is awkward, and it's supposed to be, and it gives you all the feels on both sides of that spectrum. My second commendation is Doug Jones. I cannot say enough about this wonderfully, beautifully talented man and what the character of Saru means to me. The evolution of Saru is an emotional journey for so many people, and I am 100% invested in it. Doug Jones makes being Saru look so effortless, and that's a testament to how truly incredible he is in this role. And then lastly, my third commendation goes to Bowie and Erica and Doug. Just like on The Brightest Star, I have to give a commendation to writers Bowie Kim and Erica Lipolt, and also to director Doug Arniakowski. This is the perfect follow-up to the short trek and a fantastic canon-building episode of Star Trek. It really is.
Long-range scan of planet complete.
Gentlemen, what is next for Star Trek Discovery? Here we're going to give our thoughts on what's going to happen next week, or maybe even further along in the season. I had a Matrix feel when I saw the coming attractions for next week. I'm going to throw that out there right now. For me, I'll start here with my long-range scan. Something's going to happen to Section 31. Something that's going to require them to become the super secret organization it is when Deep Space Nine rolls around. It's way too open right now, and everybody has been saying that. They have comm badges. They have ships with cloaking technology and holographic technology, and everybody seems to know Section 31. Something's going to take place with regards to the Red Angel and how this all wraps up, and it's going to make that organization fall into one of absolute secrecy and autonomy. Kasey, what do you got?
Unfortunately, I think that the Ash character is going to die in this season, and I actually think that Giorgio is going to be the cause of that. She's going to put him in a situation in Section 31, and he's going to pay the price for that. I'm also wondering on this, since time travel aspects were brought up with the Red Angel, is the Red Angel Michael from the future? I don't know, but that just struck me as a possibility, and then I think that there's going to be a rocky road ahead for Dr. Culber throughout the season.
3 long-range scans. That's a lot of scanning. You should be in science. Bill, what about you, man?
I don't know. I'm not that bright. I shouldn't be in science. I'm going to tell you that right now. Dan, I've been feeling cocky. Last week on Discovering Trek, we revealed that I was right about Culber. I finally had a prediction come true. Yay.
Congratulations.
And so I'm
one for everything. Good for you.
Yeah, I know. Every now and then, right? So I'm going to double down on a prediction I had a couple of weeks ago, and Kasey has touched on this a little bit. I think that the Red Angel is a time-traveling Michael Burnham from the future. And I don't know why yet. There's got to be some reason. But you figure the Red Angel has always been in some proximity to her, with the exception of the people on Earth that were taken to Terra Elysia. Somehow the Red Angel may not necessarily be tied to Spock as we think, but I think it has something to do with Michael, and I think it's because it's her. So that's my long-range scan for now.
Let me throw something out there to you guys, and even though we're still a long-range scan, it might not go to it. Do you think that it is that people writing, not necessarily just for Discovery, but for other things, are using the idea of time travel a little too much these days? I just thought of that as you were talking about it, Bill.
Possibly, but it's something that always engages people. It's always worked in Star Trek whenever it's tried.
Yes.
Some of Star Trek's most successful outings have been time travel stories, whether it's Star Trek For the Voyage Home or Star Trek First Contact or Voyagers, the one where they went to present day LA at the time, or you name it. So time travel always works.
Kasey, do you feel the same?
I think so, because I think it hits us in a primal aspect of ourselves of, boy, don't we wish we could go back and redo certain things and go literally like, oh God, if I could just have not done that, or if I could just have done that, boy, that'd be great. So I think that part of this storytelling, as long as it's not massively overused, can really hit home with us and resonate.
Nice.
In the immortal words of that sage observer of our times, Cher, if I could turn back time, Dan, I'd find a way.
Find a way.
And you said it as Kirk, so that was even better. Very nicely done.
If I could find a way to go back an hour from now.
Well, speaking of time travel, let's jump ahead to the next segment, guys, and let's talk about what we're going to see next week. Next week is the halfway point of this season, episode 7 out of 14. So, Bill, what's coming up?
Dan, next week we're going to consider episode 7 of this season of Star Trek Discovery, entitled Light and Shadows. Will we finally see our beloved Vulcan science officer? We're going to see, and joining us to examine this episode will be our good friend Thad Haight from the Voyager podcast Delta Flyer. Until then, remember you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or by heading on over to discoveringtrek.com. Plus, now you can support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks network of podcasts by subscribing to bonus content via Patreon. Get access to our exclusive Carpool Conversations, see the first of our annual supporters pins, and check out the exclusive Podfleet t-shirt along with so many other perks.
And, speaking of Patreon, Bill, we want to take a moment to recognize the following amazing producers of Discovering Trek. We are so thankful for their support. And they include Ken Tripp, Kasey Shafsky, that guy sounds familiar, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Lionel Marchand, Craig Ewing, Sean O'Halloran, Chris Trabuzio, Eric Extreme, Norman Lau, Mike Bovia, and Patrick Escudero.
Now, if you'd like to become a producer of Discovering Trek or even get access to the raw audio for Discovering Trek episodes like this one, head on over to patreon.com/TrekGeeks.
Well, Kasey, man, it's so great to finally have you here on Discovering Trek. Had a good time, as we always do, whether it's digitally or in person. Your company is always appreciated. Love hanging out with you and talking Star Trek. Where can people find you online, my good man?
Well, you can find me on IMDb with projects that I'm working on right now, and that's about it right now. We have a lot of things that are being worked on that will be coming out later this year. That I some are very Trek oriented and others are not. So that's where I am. I'm in the ether.
He's a busy guy, and best of luck with all those projects, man. I'm sure they're going to be awesome. And maybe we'll have you on again.
I would love it. And before you sign off, because I want everybody to hear this, that you two guys are two of the most sincere, amazing, deep people that I've met. And I'm extremely thankful to be able to be a part of your guys' lives, and just know that I have never heard a single bad word, multiple words, but not a single bad word about you guys. But down deep, thank you very much for this opportunity. I love hanging out with you.
Well, we love hanging out with you too, buddy. Well, folks, that's it for us and our discussion on The Sound of Thunder. Hit us up on Facebook and Twitter to let us know what you thought about the episode and about Discovering Trek as well. We thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to us talk about this amazing new chapter in the Star Trek universe. And we look forward to sitting down again next week to talk about Episode 7. Until then, here are some words of wisdom from Captain Christopher Pike. Sometimes it's wise to keep our expectations low. That way, we're never disappointed. And until next week, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing one song for each episode of the original Star Trek. Download their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek, a Star Trek Discovery companion, is a production of Trek Geeks. Executive producer Dan Davidson. For even more Star Trek discussion, check out the Trek Geeks podcast, available on Apple Podcasts and TrekGeeks.com.